The early morning sun filtered through the trees as Kem sat on the edge of the family compound, his heart heavy with the burden of truth. The lies of the shrine, the blood-soaked covenant, and the fear that bound his family, they all weighed on him. But as he watched the village slowly come to life, he felt a spark of determination. He couldn't let the idol continue to control them. Kem knew he couldn't fight this battle alone. He remembered hearing about a traveling preacher who had passed through the village months ago, leaving behind tales of miracles and liberation. The man's words had stirred hope in those willing to listen, though many dismissed him as an outsider meddling in matters beyond his understanding. Kem decided he had to find him. After days of searching and asking discreet questions, Kem learned the preacher was holding a gathering in a nearby village. Without telling anyone, he set out at dawn, his feet carrying him over dusty roads and through dense forest. The journey was long, but the thought of finding someone who could help kept him moving. When Kem finally reached the village, he found a small crowd gathered under the shade of a large baobab tree. At the center stood the preacher, a tall man with a calm presence that commanded attention. His voice was powerful yet gentle, speaking of freedom from fear and the chains of darkness. Kem waited until the crowd dispersed before approaching. The preacher noticed him immediately, his eyes filled with understanding. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice kind. "What troubles your heart?" Kem hesitated, then poured out everything, the covenant, the shrine, the idol's threats, and his family's suffering. The preacher listened quietly, his expression serious but calm. "Fear is the weapon of darkness," the preacher said finally. "It thrives on silence and secrecy. But light exposes its lies, and truth sets us free. How do I break the covenant?" Kem asked, his voice trembling with desperation. "With faith and courage," the preacher replied. "You must confront the idol, not with your strength, but with the authority of the truth. But be warned, darkness does not let go without a fight." The preacher agreed to help, and together they returned to Ekuro. Word of the preacher's arrival spread quickly, and villagers gathered outside the compound, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Chief Olisa emerged from the house, his eyes narrowing when he saw the preacher. "What business do you have here?" the old man demanded. "I have come to bring light to a place consumed by darkness," the preacher replied evenly. "Your family is bound by a covenant that must be broken." Chief Olisa's expression hardened. "You speak of things you do not understand. Leave this village." But the preacher stood firm. "Your grandson has chosen to break free. Will you stand in his way?" The villagers murmured among themselves, their eyes darting between the preacher and Chief Olisa. Kem stepped forward, his voice shaking but steady. "Grandfather, this covenant has brought us nothing but fear and death. We can't let it continue." For a moment, the chief's expression faltered, and a flicker of regret crossed his face. But before he could respond, a low hum filled the air, a sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The villagers fell silent, their faces pale as the hum grew louder. Suddenly, the idol's voice echoed through the clearing, cold and furious. "You dare to defy me? I have given you wealth, power, and protection. Without me, you are nothing." The preacher raised his hand, his voice firm. "You have no power here. The truth has been revealed, and your lies will no longer bind these people." The air grew heavy, and the villagers gasped as the sky darkened unnaturally. The preacher began to pray, his words cutting through the oppressive atmosphere like a blade. Kem knelt beside him, his hands clasped tightly, his heart pounding but resolute. As the prayer continued, the heaviness lifted, and the shadows around the shrine seemed to waver. The idol's voice grew weaker, fading into a whisper before disappearing entirely. The villagers watched in awe as the oppressive energy that had gripped the village for generations melted away. Chief Olisa fell to his knees, his face buried in his hands. "I was blind," he whispered. "Forgive me." The preacher placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. "There is forgiveness for those who seek it." Kem stood, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The covenant was broken, and the chains of fear were gone. But he knew this was just the beginning. The family and the village would need time to heal.